Liz O'Dwyer here. Please jump into the Facebook and let me know if you have any questions or queries about any of your previous not negotiables. If you're having any trouble sourcing it, which you shouldn't have any difficulty sourcing any of it. The only thing that may be an issue is time, and I get that completely. But do shout out if you've got any issues on your not negotiables so far. Because if you're experiencing any delays, perhaps other people are as well. So the next step in your not negotiables is food waste, tackling food waste to either reduce it or preferably eliminate any food waste. Now, there are going to be several benefits to this. One is obviously the reduced food waste, and you can give it new lifestyles, repurposing, not new lifestyles, repurposing your food waste. But there's also a monetary gain to be had with this. So you're not actually throwing food out and then wasting the money that you've actually purchased that food from. So let's have a look at the food waste and what you can do to eliminate it. So the first thing that I would look at is the planning your meals during the week. Now, I'm a kind of a fly by the seat of my pants girl, and so I don't sit and do much planning, although I do know now what works for me in terms of what I would eat, what I wouldn't eat. And so I'm able to purchase on the fly, and most households will do that. However, there are many reports out from government bodies and research organisations that give us staggering figures in the number of waste items each week or each month or each year, however they want to calculate it. And it says that about 20% of the food that a household purchases during the week is eventually thrown out because it doesn't get used, or it gets cooked into a dish and, just sits in the fridge. And so that's a lot of money, 20% each week or each month or each year, however you want to calculate that. That's a lot of money. And I know what I would prefer to be doing with that 20% of cash that I would, really is just being thrown in the bin. And so we need to look at that. It's just money thrown in the bin and food just going into landfill. Now, when food goes into landfill, it creates a nasty greenhouse gas emission. And it's way, 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 way worse than, say, car emissions. And again, depending on the government report that you read, sometimes the numbers quoted are up to 27 times worse than the emissions created from driving a car. Other reports can nominate up to 47 times worse than car emissions. And so, really at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what figure they throw at you, it's a lot. And there are so many simple things that we can be doing to reduce our food waste or preferably eliminate our food waste. And so the first thing that we need to look at is meal planning, to make sure that the meal planning and the meals that you're going to purchase the food to prepare is going to be eaten. So if you normally go out and do your standard weekly shop of fruit and vegetables and meat and rice and whatever you want to buy is actually going to be purchased during that week. There's no point in buying that and then realizing that the whole household's going to be out 3 out of 5 nights of the week. So, meal planning is essential to start eliminating that food waste that either, sits in the fridge and then just goes off and you need to throw it out. Now, the second thing is, but that's not negotiable. That's just we need to do that. We need to get smart with our time, with our purchases, and with our money, because I'd like to be doing something different than throwing that 20% of my wage into the bin. But the thing that we need to, the thing that will help us eliminate that food waste is a compost bin. Now, if you're in a standalone property, then it's my opinion, all households should run a compost bin, because we all eat food at home at some point. And so you think, oh, well, I don't create that much food waste. It can just go into the bin and then just go straight into landfill. But, if every household in Australia thought the same way, landfill would soon fill up with a lot of food waste. And so we need to be smart about that. And as I said, I'm a great composter. And there's lots of other things that you can put into the compost apart from your fruit and veggie scraps. And so we'll go through that. We'll go through that later in a different video. But this not negotiable is about getting a compost system going that works for you. So as I said, if you're in a standalone property, again, there are a number of different options, even just to go with the black bin. You can get like a 240 litre round or a square bin from your hardware store, and you can start putting your food scraps in there. So you're actually keeping them straight out of your rubbish bin, out of landfill, and at the end of that, you can upcycle your food scraps into compost, which is great for the garden. Now, if you're not a gardener, one of your neighbours will be, or your family member will be, or a friend will be, and that compost will be gratefully accepted, I can assure you. I will have the resource sheet. Please download that for the different options of compost bins. Now, if you want to get really creative with compost bins, jump onto Pinterest, jump onto YouTube, see how other people do it. But a compost or recycling your food scraps however you want to do it is a must. If you're in an apartment, you can get a Bokashi bucket, and I'll put that on the resource sheet as well. And, again, if you don't have the space for a garden, that compost will be gratefully accepted from somebody else. Now, also I'll put on the resource sheet a website called ShareWaste, sharewaste.com.au, and it is like a donation centre for food scraps, and then people will also register to be recipients of that food waste. And you can jump on there and register your details, and there will be somebody in your area. There's something like 30,000 registrants on the ShareWaste as I record this today around Australia, and many, many more overseas. But in Australia, there's around 30,000 people registered as either donors or recipients for food waste. And so you jump on there and you can donate the food scraps to whoever in your local neighbourhood. So it's really cool to find somebody who's happy to take your scraps. I was talking to somebody, a business colleague, and I mentioned that to him. Now he lives in Melbourne City. I mentioned that, so he jumped onto the ShareWaste website, registered himself as a food donor, and while we were talking, he said, "Wow," he said, "there's a guy that lives 2 blocks from me, and he's actually registered as a recipient." And so when we got off the phone call, he took his food scraps down to the guy 2 blocks away, and he's been doing that ever since. So, it's not that far-fetched an idea to donate your food scraps to, somebody in your neighbourhood. Because I know when my compost breaks down, even when I fill the compost bin and it starts to break down, you might start off with a full bin of food scraps and other things in there. But once that breaks down, you actually break it down to just over a quarter of a bin of compost to be used. So, and a quarter of a bin of compost doesn't go that far. So help somebody out if they're creating their compost, and that actually keeps your food scraps out of landfill, keeps the greenhouse gas emissions down, and you're doing something fantastic for the community. If you don't want to donate, create your own compost. You can either do it with some chicken wire and 4 star posts if that's what you need to do. There are a number of ways that you can do it. And I've seen people, I've got a 4 bay system, but I've seen people build massive compost bays. There's just no end to what to how you actually want to create your compost bins or bays. So that's it. I will create the resource sheet that you can download, and that will have several resources in there for you, but that is your next non-negotiable to tackle food waste. And as I said, I'll have further videos throughout the program on this one, because it's a big issue in terms of what you can compost, what you can't compost. But there are a lot more things that can go in the compost than food scrap. So jump online, download your resource, and I'll see you next week, or whenever you've got your compost bin going. And it's super exciting to actually see that compost coming along. So if you've got any queries on that, please do reach out. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.